The sun had already stolen 3 days of moisture from her body. By the time Josephine Kershaw saw the wooden fence posts marking the edge of Noah Yates's ranch, her vision blurring at the edges as she forced one blistered foot in front of the other across the merciless New Mexico desert. It was September of 1882, and the heat still clung to the land like a fever that would not break. Josephine had left Deeming 3 days prior with nothing but a canvas sack, 2 canteens of water that had run dry yesterday morning, and a crumpled letter bearing Noah Yates's name. The letter had come to her boarding house in St. Louis 2 weeks ago, forwarded from her late father's attorney. It informed her that her father, a man she had not seen since childhood, had passed away and left her his half of a cattle ranch in New Mexico territory, co-owned with a man named Noah Yates. She had sold everything she owned to afford the train ticket west, arriving in Deeming with barely enough coins for a single meal. When she had inquired about transportation to the Yates ranch, the livery owner had quoted her a price that made her stomach sink. She had no money left. The ranch was her only hope now, her only chance at a life that did not involve the predatory boarding house keeper who had begun looking at her with intentions that made her skin crawl. So she had walked. The first day had not been terrible. She had started before dawn, when the air still held a whisper of coolness. But the terrain was unforgiving, nothing but scrub brush and rocky soil that seemed to stretch endlessly in all directions. By midday, the sun had become a physical weight pressing down on her shoulders. She had rationed her water carefully, taking small sips, but the heat had been relentless. The second day, one of her canteens had sprung a leak, precious water darkening the dust beneath her feet before she noticed. She had cried then, hot tears that she could not afford to waste. That night, she had huddled beneath a scraggly mesquite tree, listening to the coyotes howl in the distance, wondering if she would ever reach the ranch or if her bones would bleach white under this brutal sun. This morning, the third day, she had woken with her lips cracked and bleeding, her tongue thick in her mouth. But she had seen the fence posts in the distance and had forced herself onward. Each step had become an act of will. Her gray traveling dress, once modest and proper, was now stained with dust and sweat. Her dark hair had come loose from its pins, hanging in tangled waves down her back. Now, as she stumbled past the fence line and saw the ranch house in the distance, a low structure of adobe and wood with a barn and several outbuildings, her knees began to buckle. She tried to call out, but her voice was nothing more than a dry rasp. The canvas sack slipped from her nerveless fingers. The last thing she saw before the darkness took her was a tall figure emerging from the barn, his hat shading his face as he turned toward her. Then the ground rushed up to meet her, but she never hit it. Strong arms caught her, lifting her as though she weighed nothing at all. Through the haze, she was dimly aware of being carried, of a deep voice calling out urgently. Then there was blessed coolness, shade, and someone was pressing a wet cloth to her lips. "Easy now," the voice said, rough but gentle. "Just small sips, not too much at once or you will be sick." Water touched her tongue, and it was the most exquisite thing she had ever tasted. She tried to gulp it down, but the cloth was pulled away. "I said easy," the voice repeated, firmer this time. "You are badly dehydrated. We have to do this slowly." Josephine forced her eyes open. The face above her was sun-weathered and strong-featured, with eyes the color of aged whiskey and dark brown hair that needed cutting. He was perhaps 30 years old, maybe a year or two older, with the lean, muscular build of a man who worked hard for his living. This had to be Noah Yates. "Who are you?" he asked, his brow furrowed with concern as he pressed the wet cloth to her forehead. "Where did you come from?" She tried to speak, but her throat would not cooperate. He seemed to understand, holding a tin cup to her lips and allowing her another small sip. Deeming, she finally managed to croak. Walked from Deeming. His eyes widened in shock. Deeming? That is near 30 miles. You walked 30 miles in this heat, she nodded weakly. She was lying on a sofa in what appeared to be a simply furnished parlor. The walls were thick adobe, keeping the interior blessedly cool compared to the inferno outside. Why in God's name would you do such a thing? Where is your escort? Your horse. No money, she whispered. Had to come. I am Josephine Kershaw, Thomas Kershaw's daughter. The name clearly meant something to him. His expression shifted from confusion to shock, then to something more complicated that she could not quite read. Thomas's daughter, he repeated quietly. He sat back on his heels, studying her face as though searching for traces of the man he had known. I did not know Thomas had a daughter. He never mentioned you. The words stung, though they should not have surprised her. Her father had abandoned her, and her mother when Josephine was only 6 years old, heading west to seek his fortune. Her mother had died of consumption 5 years later, leaving Josephine to make her own way in the world. She had worked as a seamstress, then as a teacher's assistant, barely scraping by. He left when I was small, she said, her voice gaining a bit of strength. The attorney wrote to me about his death and about the ranch, my inheritance. Noah's jaw tightened slightly. He stood, moving to a small table where he poured water from a pitcher into the tin cup. When he returned, he helped her sit up slightly, supporting her back with one arm while he held the cup to her lips. Drink slowly, he instructed, a little bit at a time. She obeyed, grateful beyond words for the water and for the solid strength of his arm behind her. When she had drunk half the cup, he set it aside. You should have sent word you were coming, he said, though his tone was not unkind. I would have met you in Deeming with a wagon. You could have died out there. I had no money to send a telegram, she admitted, shame coloring her cheeks. I used everything I had just to get to Deeming. I thought if I could just reach the ranch, I would be all right. He was silent for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Finally, he said, You need food and rest. When did you last eat? Yesterday morning. A little hardtack. He shook his head, standing. I will make you some broth. Your stomach will not handle anything heavier right now. There is a bedroom just through that door. Can you walk, or shall I carry you? I can walk, she said, though she was not entirely certain that was true. She did not want to appear more helpless than she already was. He offered his hand and she took it, allowing him to pull her to her feet. Immediately, the room spun. His other arm came around her waist, steadying her. No, you cannot, he said matter-of-factly. Before she could protest, he had swept her up into his arms again, carrying her toward the bedroom as though she were a child. Josephine wanted to object, but the truth was that she felt weak as a newborn kitten. She allowed herself to rest her head against his shoulder, breathing in the scent of leather and sage and honest sweat. It should have been unpleasant, but somehow it was not. It was the smell of something real and solid in a world that had felt increasingly uncertain. He laid her gently on a narrow bed, pulling a light blanket over her despite the heat. Rest, he said. I will bring you the broth shortly. She wanted to ask him 100 questions about her father, about the ranch, about what would happen now. But exhaustion was pulling at her like a riptide, and her eyes kept drifting closed. When she woke, the light had changed. The harsh brightness of afternoon had given way to the gentler gold of early evening. She felt weak still, but better. Her headache had subsided to a dull throb, and her mouth, though dry, no longer felt like sand. There was a chair beside the bed that had not been there before, and Noah Yates sat in it, his long legs stretched out before him, his hat resting on his knee. He was watching her with those whiskey-colored eyes, his expression thoughtful. "You are awake," he observed. "Good. Think you can manage some broth now?" She nodded, pushing herself up to sitting. He rose and left the room, returning a few minutes later with a bowl of steaming liquid and a spoon. He sat on the edge of the bed, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him. "I can feed myself," she protested weakly. "Maybe so," he agreed, "but your hands are shaking. Let me help." She wanted to argue, but he was right. Her hands were trembling with weakness. Reluctantly, she allowed him to spoon the rich beef broth into her mouth. It was good, flavored with onions and salt, and she felt strength beginning to seep back into her body with each swallow. After a few spoonfuls, he paused. "I need to know what you expect," he said bluntly. "From the ranch, from me." She met his eyes. "I expect nothing from you beyond what the law entitles me to. My father owned half this ranch. That half belongs to me now. I do not know much about ranching, but I can learn. I can work. I am not afraid of hard work." Something shifted in his expression, a grudging respect perhaps. "Thomas was a good partner," he said quietly. "A good friend. He worked hard and he was honest. I am sorry he is gone. I am sorry you lost him twice." The unexpected kindness in his words made her throat tighten. "Tell me about him, please. I barely remember him." Noah set the bowl aside, leaning back slightly. "Thomas came here about 8 years ago. I had just bought this land, was trying to build something from nothing. He had some money to invest and a strong back. We became partners, split everything down the middle. He was quiet, kept to himself mostly. But he was dependable. When he said he would do something, it got done. Did he ever mention me? My mother?" Noah hesitated, and she saw the answer in his face before he spoke. "No, I am sorry. He did not talk much about his past." I got the sense there were things he was running from, though he never said what. I did not pry. Out here, a man's past is his own business. She nodded, blinking back tears. She had not expected anything different, but it still hurt to have it confirmed that her father had simply erased her from his life. "He died 3 months ago," Noah continued. "Pneumonia. It came on fast. By the time I realized how sick he was, it was too late. I rode to Deeming for the doctor, but Thomas was gone before we got back. I buried him on the rise behind the house, under the cottonwood tree. I can show you tomorrow if you like." "I would like that," she whispered. "Thank you." He picked up the bowl again, offering her more broth. She ate in silence, her mind spinning with all that had happened, all that would happen now. When the bowl was empty, Noah stood. "Get more rest," he said. "Tomorrow we will talk about the ranch, about what comes next, but tonight you need to recover your strength. Where will you sleep?" She asked, suddenly realizing that this was likely his bedroom she was occupying. "I will bunk in the barn," he said with a shrug. "It is no hardship, I have done it before." "I cannot take your bed," she protested. "I can sleep in the barn." "You are a woman who just walked 30 miles through the desert and nearly died," he said firmly. "You will sleep in a proper bed. I will hear no argument about it." There was a command in his voice that brooked no disagreement, but it was tempered with concern. Josephine found herself nodding, too tired to fight. He paused at the door, looking back at her. "For what it is worth, you are welcome here. I do not know what we are going to do about the partnership, but we will figure it out. You are not alone anymore." The words settled over her like a warm blanket, and for the first time in longer than she could remember, Josephine felt something like hope. The next morning, she woke to the smell of coffee and frying bacon. Her body ached in a dozen places, and her face felt tight and hot, likely sunburned. But she was alive, and she was here. She rose carefully, finding that someone had left a basin of water and a cloth on the dresser. She washed as best she could, wincing at the state of her dress. It was filthy and torn in places. She had one other dress in her canvas sack, but it was hardly in better condition. When she emerged from the bedroom, she found Noah at the stove, cooking breakfast. The ranch house was small but well built, consisting of the main room that served as kitchen and parlor, the bedroom she had slept in, and what appeared to be a small storage room. Everything was neat and orderly, if Spartan. "Sit," Noah said, gesturing to the rough-hewn table. "Breakfast is almost ready." She sat, accepting the cup of coffee he poured for her. It was strong and bitter, but it was exactly what she needed. A few minutes later he set a plate before her, eggs and bacon and thick slices of bread. Her stomach growled audibly. "Eat slowly," he cautioned. "Your body is still recovering." She obeyed, though she wanted to devour everything in front of her. As she ate, Noah sat across from her with his own plate, watching her with that same thoughtful expression. "I have been thinking," he said after a while, "about the ranch, about the partnership. The way I see it, we have a few options." She set down her fork, giving him her full attention. "First option, I buy you out. I give you money for your half of the ranch and you go back east or wherever you want to go. You would have enough to start fresh somewhere." The thought of leaving, of going back to the uncertain life she had fled, made her stomach clench. "What is the second option?" "Second option, you buy me out, though I suspect you do not have that kind of money." She shook her head. She had nothing. "Third option," he continued, "we remain partners. We run the ranch together. But I will be honest with you, Josephine, that would not be easy. Ranching is hard work, harder than anything you have likely done, and there is the matter of propriety. An unmarried man and woman living on the same property, it will cause talk." "I do not care about talk," she said quickly. "I have nowhere else to go, Noah. This ranch is all I have. I want to stay. I want to learn. I want to make this work." He studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "All right then. We will try it. But you need to understand what you are agreeing to. We have about 200 head of cattle right now. I have 2 ranch hands who come during roundup and branding, but otherwise, it is just me doing the work. The cattle need to be moved to different pastures, fences need mending, there is always something that needs fixing. In a few weeks, I need to take a herd to market. It is constant work. Teach me," she said firmly. "I can cook, I can clean, I can mend. Whatever else you need me to do, I will learn." Something like approval flickered across his face. "We will start today then. After you finish eating, I will show you around the property. But first, we need to do something about your clothes. You cannot work in a dress like that." She looked down at her ruined traveling dress. "This is all I have. Well, I have one other dress, but it is not much better." He rubbed his jaw, thinking. "Thomas was a smaller man than me. His clothes might fit you well enough. I kept them, was not sure what to do with them." "You can alter them as needed." The thought of wearing her father's clothes felt strange, but also somehow right. "Thank you." After breakfast, Noah brought her a trunk from the storage room. Inside were simple work clothes, shirts and trousers, and a worn leather vest. Josephine took them back to the bedroom, closing the door. She stripped out of her dress and undergarments, finding that the work shirt hung loose on her frame, but the trousers, when she cinched them with a belt, fit reasonably well. She felt almost scandalous in men's clothing, but she had to admit it was far more practical than skirts for the work ahead. When she emerged, Noah looked her up and down, then nodded. "That will do. You will want a hat too to keep the sun off. I have a spare." He handed her a wide-brimmed hat and she settled it on her head. Then he led her outside. The ranch was more extensive than she had realized. Besides the house and barn, there were corrals, a chicken coop, a smokehouse, and a shed for equipment. In the distance, she could see cattle grazing, brown and white shapes against the tawny grass. "We have about 300 acres of decent grazing land," Noah explained as they walked. Water comes from a creek that runs along the eastern boundary. That water is worth more than gold out here. I have had to run off claim jumpers more than once who wanted to redirect the creek. He showed her the barn where 4 horses stood in their stalls. This is Ranger, he said, patting the nose of a large bay gelding. He is my riding horse. That paint mare is Molly. She was your father's horse. The other 2 are work horses for pulling the wagon. Josephine reached out tentatively to stroke Molly's soft nose. The mare woofed against her palm and she smiled. Have you ridden before? Noah asked. A little when I was young, not much. Then we will need to remedy that. A ranch woman needs to know how to ride. I will teach you. They spent the rest of the morning touring the property. Noah showed her the vegetable garden that had gone somewhat to seed since Thomas's death, the hen house where chickens clucked and pecked, the creek with its precious water. He explained the rhythms of ranch life, the seasonal work of branding and roundup, the constant vigilance needed to protect the cattle from predators and rustlers. Josephine absorbed it all, asking questions, making mental notes. It was overwhelming, but it was also exciting in a way she had not expected. This was hers. This land, this life, it belonged to her now. She was not beholden to anyone, not dependent on anyone's charity or goodwill. The thought was intoxicating. In the afternoon, Noah took her to the rise behind the house, where a simple wooden cross marked her father's grave. Josephine stood there for a long time, staring at the name carved into the wood. Thomas Kershaw. She tried to summon grief, but what she felt was more complicated. Sadness for what might have been, anger at his abandonment, and a strange sort of closure. I wish I had known you, she said quietly, but thank you for this. Thank you for giving me a chance at something better. Noah stood a respectful distance away, his hat in his hands. When she finally turned to go, he fell into step beside her. He was a good man, Noah said. Whatever happened in his past, whatever mistakes he made, he was trying to build something good here. I think he would be glad to know his daughter is carrying on. That night, Josephine insisted on cooking dinner. She made a simple stew with vegetables from the garden and salt pork from the storehouse. It was not fancy, but it was hearty and filling. Noah ate with obvious appreciation. This is good, he said. Better than my cooking, that is certain. Thomas and I took turns, but neither of us had much talent for it. I can earn my keep this way at least, she said, until I learn the rest. You will learn, he assured her. You are tougher than you look. Not many people could have walked 30 miles through the desert like you did. She felt her cheeks warm at the compliment. I did not have much choice. There is always a choice. You could have turned back, you could have given up, but you did not. They fell into a routine over the following days. Josephine woke early before dawn and made breakfast while Noah tended to the horses and other livestock. After eating, he would teach her the skills she needed. How to saddle a horse properly, how to sit in the saddle and control the animal with her knees and the reins. How to mend a fence, how to recognize when a cow was sick or injured. How to shoot a rifle in case of predators or trouble. She proved to be an apt pupil, soaking up knowledge like parched earth soaking up rain. Her hands blistered from unaccustomed work, then calloused. Her muscles ached at the end of each day, but it was a good ache, the ache of accomplishment. Noah was a patient teacher, though he did not coddle her. When she made a mistake, he corrected her firmly but without meanness. When she succeeded, he offered brief praise. Slowly, she began to understand the rhythms of the ranch, the way everything connected and depended on everything else. In the evenings, they would sit on the porch as the sun set, drinking coffee and talking. Noah told her stories about the ranch, about the challenges he and Thomas had faced in building it, about the time a mountain lion had gotten into the herd and they had tracked it for 2 days before finally driving it off. About the year, the creek had nearly run dry and they had to drive the cattle 10 miles to find water. Josephine, in turn, told him about her life in St. Louis. About working as a seamstress, the boarding house, the constant struggle to make ends meet. About her mother, the gentle woman who had loved her and done her best despite being abandoned and poor. She never spoke ill of him, Josephine said one evening, watching the sky turn orange and purple. My father, I mean. Even though he left us with nothing, she never said a bad word about him. I used to wonder if she still loved him, even after everything. Love is a strange thing, Noah said quietly. It does not always make sense. It does not always go away just because it should. She glanced at him, curious. Have you ever been in love? He was silent for so long she thought he might not answer. Finally, he said, once. A long time ago, it did not work out. What happened? She wanted a different life than I could give her. City life, fine things, society, I wanted this. He gestured at the land around them. We wanted different things, so we went our separate ways. Do you regret it? No, he said firmly. This is where I belong. I would not be happy anywhere else. She would not have been happy here. It would have been a misery for both of us eventually. Josephine nodded, understanding. She looked out at the darkening landscape, at the vast sky beginning to fill with stars. I think I belong here too, she said softly. I know I have only been here a short time, but it feels right. Does that sound foolish? No, Noah said, and when she looked at him, there was something warm in his eyes. It does not sound foolish at all. Weeks passed, and Josephine grew stronger, more confident. She could ride Molly now without fear, could help Noah move the cattle to fresh pasture. She took over all the cooking and the care of the chickens and the garden, freeing Noah to focus on the heavier work. They functioned like a well-oiled machine, each complementing the other. The talk that Noah had worried about did indeed start. When they went into Deeming for supplies, Josephine felt the stares, heard the whispers. An unmarried man and woman living together on an isolated ranch. It was scandalous. Some of the townspeople were openly disapproving. The shopkeeper's wife made pointed comments about propriety. The minister gave Noah a stern talking to about the appearance of sin. Noah bore it all stoically, but Josephine could see it bothered him. He was a proud man, an honest man, and the insinuations stung. One evening, after a particularly unpleasant trip to town, Josephine brought it up. Perhaps I should move into Deeming, she said reluctantly. I could find work there, come out to the ranch during the day to help. No, Noah said sharply. Then, more gently, this is your home. You should not have to leave it because of small-minded gossip. But it is affecting you. Your reputation. I do not give a damn about my reputation, he said. Well, that is not entirely true. I do care, but I care more about doing what is right, and it is right for you to be here. This is your ranch as much as mine. There is one way to solve it, she said quietly, her heart pounding. We could marry. In name only, I mean. A marriage of convenience to silence the talk. We could continue on as partners, but it would be respectable. Noah stared at her, his expression unreadable. The silence stretched so long that Josephine began to regret speaking. Finally, he said, Is that what you want? A marriage in name only? The question was loaded with something she could not quite identify. She thought about these past weeks, about working beside Noah every day. About the way her heart had begun to beat faster when he smiled at her. About how she had started to notice little things, the way his eyes crinkled when he laughed, the strength in his hands, the kindness beneath his gruff exterior. I do not know, she admitted honestly. I know that I care about you. I know that I respect you. I know that when I think about my future, you are in it. Whether that is as a business partner or something more, I am not certain. He stood, walking to the edge of the porch, his back to her. I care about you too, Josephine. More than I should, probably. More than is wise, given our situation. Her breath caught. What are you saying? He turned to face her, and in his eyes she saw something that made her pulse race. I am saying that if we are going to marry, I do not want it to be in name only. I am saying that I have come to care for you deeply these past weeks, that I admire your strength and your courage, that I look forward to seeing you each morning and I think about you when we are apart. I am saying that if you will have me, truly have me, I would be honored to be your husband. Josephine stood, her legs shaky. She crossed to him, standing close enough that she could feel the warmth of him. I would have you, she whispered. Truly. He reached up slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted, and cupped her face in his calloused hands. Then he kissed her, gentle and sweet and full of promise. Josephine melted into him, her arms coming around his waist, and felt something inside her click into place. This was right. This was where she belonged. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Noah rested his forehead against hers. We will do this properly, he said. I will court you. We will have a proper engagement, a proper wedding. I want everyone to know that you are my choice, that this is real. How long of an engagement? She asked, smiling. However long you need, he said. Though I confess I would marry you tomorrow if you would have me. Tomorrow seems a bit rushed, she teased, but perhaps not too long. Perhaps a month, he agreed, giving us time to make arrangements for you to be certain. I am already certain, she said, kissing him again. The next day they rode into Deeming together and went straight to the general store. Noah bought her a simple gold band, the nicest one the store had. Then they visited the minister, the same one who had lectured Noah about propriety. The minister was surprised to see them, even more surprised by their request to be married. This is rather sudden, he said suspiciously. Are you quite certain this is not just an attempt to avoid scandal? We are quite certain, Noah said firmly. I love this woman. I intend to marry her and spend the rest of my life with her. We would like to do so with your blessing, but if you refuse, we will find someone else to perform the ceremony. The minister looked at Josephine. And you, Miss Kershaw, do you enter into this marriage freely and willingly? I do, she said, meeting his eyes. I love Noah. I want to be his wife. Something in her certainty seemed to convince him. He nodded slowly. Very well. We will hold the ceremony a month from today. That will give time for the banns to be read, for you to make proper preparations. They spent the next month in a flurry of activity. Josephine made herself a simple but pretty dress from fabric she bought in town, cream-colored cotton with lace at the collar and cuffs. Noah cleaned the ranch house from top to bottom, built a larger bed for the bedroom, and even painted the porch. They worked together during the day as always, but now there was a new awareness between them. Touches lingered a bit longer. Glances held more meaning. Noah was true to his word about courting her properly. He brought her wildflowers that he picked on his rides, carved her a small wooden box for her keepsakes, read to her in the evenings from a book of poetry he had kept from his school days. Josephine baked his favorite foods, mended his clothes with extra care, and caught herself daydreaming about their wedding night with a mixture of nervousness and anticipation. The wedding took place on a crisp October morning. The summer heat had finally broken, and the air held a hint of the cooler weather to come. Josephine wore her cream-colored dress and carried a bouquet of late-blooming desert marigolds. Noah wore his Sunday best, a dark suit he had owned for years, but rarely had occasion to wear. He cleaned up well, Josephine thought with a smile, looking handsome and almost uncomfortable in the formal clothing. The ceremony was simple, held in the small church in Deeming. A handful of people attended, mostly neighbors and acquaintances from town. Some were genuinely happy for them. Others attended more out of curiosity than goodwill. Josephine did not care. The only person who mattered was standing before her, holding her hands and looking at her as though she was the most precious thing in the world. "I, Noah Yates, take you, Josephine Kershaw, to be my lawfully wedded wife," he said, his voice steady and sure. "To have and to hold from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, until death do us part. I, Josephine Kershaw, take you, Noah Yates, to be my lawfully wedded husband," she replied, her voice trembling slightly with emotion. "To have and to hold from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, until death do us part." The minister pronounced them man and wife, and Noah kissed her soundly, to the applause of the assembled guests. There was a small reception afterward at the boarding house where Josephine had briefly stayed when she first arrived in Deeming. The owner, a kind widow named Mrs. Patterson, had offered to host it. There was cake and punch, and a few of the townspeople came to offer their congratulations. Finally, as the sun began to sink toward the horizon, Noah helped Josephine into the wagon and they headed home to the ranch. Their ranch now. The ride was quiet, both of them wrapped in their own thoughts. When they arrived, Noah helped her down from the wagon, then surprised her by sweeping her up into his arms. "What are you doing?" she laughed. "Carrying my bride over the threshold," he said, grinning. "It is tradition." He carried her inside, setting her down gently in the middle of the parlor. Then his expression grew more serious. He took her hands in his. "Josephine, I want you to know that we do not have to do anything tonight that you are not ready for. I know this has all happened rather quickly. If you need time, I can wait. I will sleep in the barn, or we can just sleep, nothing more. I do not want you to feel pressured." She was touched by his consideration, but she was ready. She had been ready since that first kiss on the porch. She reached up and cupped his face, pulling him down for a kiss. "I am ready," she whispered against his lips. "I want this, I want you." That was all the encouragement he needed. He kissed her deeply, his arms coming around her, pulling her close. She responded with equal passion, her fingers tangling in his hair. They made their way to the bedroom, pausing every few steps to kiss again, to explore with hands and mouths this new intimacy between them. What followed was tender and passionate and occasionally awkward in the way of first times, but it was perfect because they were together. Afterward, they lay tangled in the sheets, Josephine's head on Noah's chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "I love you," she said softly. "I do not think I have said that enough today." "I love you too," he replied, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "I never thought I would find this again. Find someone who fits into my life so perfectly. You are a gift, Josephine Yates." She smiled at the sound of her new name. Josephine Yates. It felt right. The months that followed were some of the happiest of Josephine's life. She and Noah settled into married life with surprising ease. They worked together during the day, learning each other's rhythms and habits. They made love often, discovering each other's bodies and desires. They talked late into the night about their dreams for the ranch, for their future. Winter came, and with it the hard work of keeping the cattle fed and watered when the grass was sparse and the creek sometimes froze. Noah taught Josephine how to break the ice so the cattle could drink, how to supplement their feed with hay they had put up in the fall. Spring brought calving season, and Josephine learned to assist with difficult births, to care for the newborn calves, to recognize signs of illness or injury. It was exhausting work, but also deeply satisfying. She was becoming a true ranch woman, capable and confident. In early summer, Josephine began to suspect that she might be carrying a child. She missed her monthly courses, felt queasy in the mornings, and her breasts became tender. She waited another month to be certain before telling Noah. When she finally did, On a warm June evening as they sat on the porch, he was overcome with joy. He picked her up and spun her around, laughing, before setting her down quickly and looking worried. "Did I hurt you? The baby?" "We are fine," she assured him, laughing at his suddenly nervous expression. "I am not made of glass, Noah. I am going to continue working as long as I can." "Within reason," he said firmly. "No heavy lifting, no breaking horses, no climbing on the roof to fix shingles." "I have never climbed on the roof to fix shingles," she pointed out. "And you are not going to start now," he said, kissing her forehead. The pregnancy progressed normally. Josephine continued to work, though Noah was constantly trying to get her to rest, to take it easy. In the fall, when her belly had grown round and heavy, he finally convinced her to let him hire a young man from town to help with the work. The young man's name was Daniel, and he was eager and hardworking, if inexperienced. Noah taught him the same way he had taught Josephine, with patience and firmness. Having the extra help allowed Josephine to focus on preparing for the baby. She sewed tiny clothes, made blankets, prepared the small storage room to serve as a nursery. Mrs. Patterson from town came out several times to check on her and offer advice about childbirth. Noah became increasingly nervous as Josephine's time drew near. The baby came on a cold February night in 1884. The labor was long and difficult, lasting nearly 20 hours. Noah paced the parlor like a caged animal while Mrs. Patterson attended Josephine. Finally, in the dark hours before dawn, a baby's cry pierced the air. Mrs. Patterson emerged from the bedroom, smiling tiredly. "You have a son," she told Noah, "a healthy boy. And your wife is doing well, though she is exhausted." Noah rushed into the bedroom, finding Josephine propped up against the pillows, her hair damp with sweat, her face pale but glowing with happiness. In her arms was a tiny bundle, and when she pulled back the blanket, Noah saw his son for the first time. The baby had a shock of dark hair and his eyes were scrunched shut, his little mouth working as though he was already hungry. Noah reached out with one finger to stroke the impossibly soft cheek and felt his throat tighten with emotion. "He is perfect," he whispered. "He is," Josephine agreed. "What should we name him?" They had discussed names but had not decided definitively. Now, looking at his son, Noah said, "What about Thomas? After your father?" Josephine's eyes filled with tears. "Thomas," she repeated. "Yes, Thomas Yates. I think my father would have liked that." Baby Thomas was a good baby, sleeping and eating well. Josephine recovered quickly from the birth, and within a few weeks, she was back to doing light work around the ranch. Noah was a doting father, holding the baby every chance he got, talking to him about the ranch, about the cattle, about everything and nothing. As Thomas grew, the ranch prospered. They increased their herd, bought more land, built a larger barn. Daniel proved to be a reliable worker, and they eventually hired another man as well. Noah and Josephine talked about building a larger house, one with more bedrooms for the children they hoped to have. When Thomas was 2 years old, Josephine found herself pregnant again. This time, the pregnancy was easier, and she delivered a healthy baby girl in the spring of 1886. They named her Sarah, after Josephine's mother. The years passed in a blur of work and love and laughter. Thomas grew into a sturdy boy who followed his father everywhere, learning to ride almost before he could walk. Sarah was a bright, curious child who loved helping her mother in the garden and with the chickens. In 1889, they welcomed another son, whom they named James. 2 years later came another daughter, Elizabeth. The ranch house they had built was filled with noise and chaos and joy. Josephine sometimes paused in the middle of her busy days to marvel at the life she had built, at how different it was from the desperate girl who had walked 30 miles through the desert nearly a decade ago. Noah was a wonderful father and husband. He was patient with the children, teaching them the skills they would need to run the ranch someday. He was loving with Josephine, still bringing her wildflowers, still reading to her in the evenings when the children were asleep, still making her feel cherished and desired. They had their struggles, of course. There were years when drought threatened the cattle, years when prices were low and money was tight. There was the time a band of rustlers tried to steal part of their herd and Noah, and the ranch hands had to ride out in the night to stop them. There was the scarlet fever outbreak that swept through Deeming and had them, all terrified that one of the children might fall ill. But they weathered every storm together, their love and partnership only growing stronger with each challenge they faced. On a warm September evening in 1895, Josephine sat on the porch of their ranch house, watching the sun set over the land she had come to love so deeply. Noah sat beside her, his arm around her shoulders, both of them comfortable in the silence that comes from years of shared life. Thomas, now 11, was in the corral working with a young horse. Sarah, 9, was inside helping to clean up after supper. James and Elizabeth were playing in the yard, their laughter carrying on the evening breeze. "You ever think about that day?" Noah asked quietly. "The day you walked here?" "Often," Josephine admitted. "I think about how desperate I was, how scared. I thought I was walking toward my only option, my last chance. I did not know I was walking toward my future, toward everything I had ever wanted but did not know to dream of." "I think about it too," Noah said. "I was out by the barn, checking on a lame horse. I turned and saw this figure in the distance, stumbling toward the house. At first, I thought you were a mirage, something conjured by the heat. Then I realized you were real and you were falling. I have never run so fast in my life. I caught you just before you hit the ground. You carried me inside," she said softly. "You saved my life." "You saved mine too," he said, turning to look at her. "Maybe not as dramatically, but you did. I was alone out here building this ranch but not really living. You brought life to this place. You brought love. You brought joy. You gave me a family, a purpose beyond just surviving. You saved me, Josephine." She leaned her head against his shoulder, feeling the familiar strength of him, the solidity that had been her anchor for 13 years. "We saved each other then." "We did," he agreed, kissing the top of her head. They sat in comfortable silence, watching their children play, watching the sun paint the sky in shades of orange and purple and pink. Josephine thought about the girl she had been, walking through the desert with blistered feet and a desperate heart. She thought about the woman she had become, strong and capable and loved. She thought about the ranch that had started as her father's legacy but had become her home. About the man who had started as a stranger but had become her partner in every sense of the word. About the children who filled her days with purpose and her heart with love. "You have any regrets?" Noah asked, as though reading her thoughts. Josephine considered the question seriously. "No," she said finally, "not a single one. Every hardship, every struggle, it brought me here, to this place, to you, to this life. I would walk through that desert 100 times over if it meant ending up here." "I would catch you every time," Noah promised. "Every single time." As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Josephine felt a deep sense of peace. She had walked 3 days to reach this ranch, carried by desperation and hope. She had been carried inside by a cowboy with kind eyes and strong arms. And in doing so, she had found not just a home, but a love that had transformed her life in ways she could never have imagined. The years continued to unfold with the predictable rhythm of ranch life, each season bringing its own challenges and joys. Thomas grew into a young man who was the image of his father, tall and lean with the same steady temperament. He had a natural way with horses and cattle, and it was clear he would be a fine rancher one day. Sarah inherited her mother's determination and her father's practical nature. She could ride as well as any of the boys in the area and was not afraid to get her hands dirty. She also had a gift for numbers and helped Josephine keep the ranch accounts. James was the adventurous one, always exploring, always asking questions. He loved the land itself, collecting rocks and studying the plants and animals. Josephine wondered if he might one day leave the ranch to study natural sciences, though he was still young. Elizabeth, the baby, was a sunny-natured child who loved everyone and everything. She followed her siblings around, trying to do whatever they did, and had the entire ranch wrapped around her little finger. In 1898, when Thomas was 14 and already working alongside his father as a full partner in the ranch operations, Josephine discovered she was pregnant again. At 36, she had thought her childbearing years were likely behind her, but apparently the universe had other plans. Noah was delighted, though also worried. "You are older now," he said, his brow furrowed with concern. "Is it safe?" "Women have babies at my age all the time," she assured him. "Mrs. Patterson is experienced. We will be fine." The pregnancy was harder than her previous ones, with more aches and pains and fatigue. But when she delivered a healthy baby boy in the spring of 1899, any discomfort was forgotten. They named him Samuel, and he completed their family. As the new century approached, the ranch had become one of the most successful in the region. They now ran nearly 1,000 head of cattle, employed 6 regular ranch hands, and owned over 2,000 acres of land. Noah and Josephine had built not just a ranch but a legacy. On New Year's Eve of 1899, they hosted a party at the ranch, inviting friends and neighbors to celebrate the turn of the century. The house was full of people, of laughter and music and dancing. Josephine moved through the crowd, playing hostess, but her eyes kept finding Noah across the room. As midnight approached, he made his way to her side, taking her hand and leading her out onto the porch, away from the noise and crowd. "I wanted a moment alone with you," he said, "before the new century begins." "That is sweet," she said, smiling up at him. "What a strange thought, a new century. So much has changed in just the last 18 years. "Everything has changed," he agreed. "When this century began, I was 12 years old, living in Kansas with my parents. You were not even born yet, and now here we are. A family, a ranch, a life beyond anything I could have imagined back then." "What do you think the new century will bring?" Josephine asked. "I do not know," Noah admitted, "but I know that whatever comes, we will face it together. That is all that matters." Inside, the crowd began counting down to midnight. Noah pulled Josephine into his arms, and as the shouts of "Happy New Year" erupted from the house, he kissed her deeply, a kiss full of promise and memory and enduring love. The new century brought changes to the world around them. Automobiles began to appear on the streets of Deeming, though the ranch still relied on horses. Electricity came to town, and Noah talked about eventually running lines out to the ranch. The world was modernizing, becoming more connected. But on the ranch, the fundamental rhythms remained the same. Cattle still needed to be fed and watered and moved to fresh pasture. Calves were still born in the spring. The work was still hard and honest and satisfying. Thomas married in 1905, bringing home a sweet-faced girl named Anna from a neighboring ranch. Noah and Josephine built them a small house on the property, and Thomas officially became a full partner in the ranch operations. The following year, Thomas and Anna welcomed Noah and Josephine's first grandchild, a little girl they named Mary. Holding her granddaughter for the first time, Josephine felt the circle of life complete itself. She thought about her own mother, who had never lived to see her grandchildren. She thought about her father, who had never known she existed, at least not as an adult. And she felt grateful beyond measure for the family she had built, for the love that surrounded her. Sarah eventually married a banker from Deeming and moved to town, though she visited the ranch often. James, as Josephine had suspected, showed an aptitude for learning and eventually went east to study at a university. He wrote long letters home describing his studies in geology and botany, and Josephine took pride in his achievements. Elizabeth married a young rancher from a property south of theirs, combining the two ranches into an even larger operation. And little Samuel, growing up with all his siblings married and gone, became his parents' constant companion, learning the ranch from both Noah and Josephine. In 1910, on a beautiful autumn day much like the one when they had married, Noah and Josephine celebrated their 28th wedding anniversary. Their children and grandchildren gathered at the ranch for a party. There were now 5 grandchildren, with another on the way, and the house rang with the sounds of family. That evening, after everyone had gone home or to bed, Noah and Josephine walked out to the rise where Thomas Kershaw was buried. They had added a small family cemetery there over the years, with plots marked for themselves and their descendants. 28 years, Josephine said, squeezing Noah's hand. Sometimes it feels like yesterday that I walked up to this ranch, half dead from thirst and desperation. Other times it feels like another lifetime. You were so young, Noah said, smiling at the memory. So thin and sunburned and determined. I remember thinking, after I got you inside and gave you water, that you had the most beautiful green eyes I had ever seen. Even exhausted and near death, you were the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. I thought you were so serious, Josephine recalled. So stern and practical, it took me weeks to realize how kind you were beneath that gruff exterior. I was terrified, Noah admitted. Terrified of what I was feeling. Terrified that you would leave, that you would decide ranch life was not for you. Terrified that I was too old, too rough around the edges for someone like you. Too old, Josephine laughed. You were barely 30 when we met, and I was the one who was terrified. Terrified that I would fail, that I would not be strong enough, that you would regret taking me in. I have never regretted a single moment, Noah said firmly. Not one. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Josephine Yates. She turned in his arms, looking up at him. His hair was gray now, his face more weathered and lined, but his eyes still held that same warmth, that same steady love that had drawn her to him all those years ago. And you are the best thing that ever happened to me, she said. The ranch, the children, all of it is wonderful. But you, Noah, you are the heart of it all. You are my home. They kissed there under the stars in the place where Josephine's father rested and where they themselves would one day rest. And Josephine felt the weight of all the years, all the love, all the life they had shared together. The years marched on as years do. Noah and Josephine grew older, their hair turning silver, their movements a bit slower. But they still worked the ranch together, still sat on the porch in the evenings, still loved each other with the deep, abiding affection that comes from a lifetime shared. In 1918, the world was at war, and James volunteered to serve, despite being in his 30s with a family of his own. Josephine worried constantly, barely sleeping until the war ended and James returned home, thinner and quieter but whole. Thomas took over more and more of the day-to-day ranch operations, though Noah still rode out to check on the cattle when he could. Samuel, now a young man, worked alongside his brother, and together they ensured the ranch continued to thrive. In 1920, women gained the right to vote, and Josephine rode into Deeming with Sarah and Elizabeth to cast her first ballot. It felt momentous, a sign of how much the world had changed since she was a young woman with no rights and no options. But through all the changes in the wider world, the ranch remained a constant. It was still the place where Josephine felt most herself, most at peace. It was still the home she had walked 3 days to reach, the place where she had found love and purpose and belonging. In the summer of 1925, Noah fell ill. It started as a cough that would not go away, then developed into pneumonia. The doctor came from Deeming, shaking his head gravely. Noah was 68 years old, and his body was worn from a lifetime of hard work. Josephine refused to leave his side. She bathed his fevered brow, forced him to drink water and broth, prayed harder than she had ever prayed for him to recover. The children gathered, worried, waiting. For 2 weeks, Noah fought the illness and Josephine fought alongside him. And then, miraculously, the fever broke. He was weak, terribly weak, but he was going to live. As he slowly regained his strength over the following months, Noah became more reflective. He talked often about the past, about the ranch, about the life they had built together. "We did good, did we not?" he asked Josephine one evening. They were sitting on the porch as they had countless times before, watching the sunset. "We did very good," she agreed. "We built something lasting, something worthwhile." "I have been thinking," Noah said slowly, "about the day you arrived. Do you know what I remember most clearly?" "What?" "The moment I caught you. You were falling, and I caught you just before you hit the ground. And in that moment, before I even saw your face properly, I knew. I knew my life was about to change. I knew that something important had just happened." "You never told me that," Josephine said softly. "I did not understand it myself at the time," Noah admitted. "But looking back, I can see it so clearly. You walked 3 days to reach this ranch, and I caught you before you fell. And then we caught each other, over and over again, through all the years that followed. Every time one of us stumbled, the other was there to offer support. Every challenge, every joy, we faced it together." "We did," Josephine agreed, tears in her eyes. "We still do." Noah recovered fully from his illness, and they had several more good years together. They celebrated their 50th wedding anniversary in 1933, surrounded by children and grandchildren, and even great-grandchildren. The family had grown large and prosperous, a testament to the foundation Noah and Josephine had built. In the spring of 1935, Noah passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 78. Josephine woke to find him beside her, looking more at peace than she had ever seen him. Though her heart broke, there was also gratitude. They had been granted 52 years together, a lifetime of love. She buried him on the rise next to her father, under the endless New Mexico sky he had loved. And though she grieved, she also continued on. The ranch needed her, the family needed her, and she was not ready to give up yet. Josephine lived another 12 years, remaining active and involved in the ranch operations until the very end. She taught her grandchildren to ride, told them stories about the old days, about their grandfather, about the history of the family and the land. On a warm September evening in 1947, Josephine sat on the porch one last time, watching the sunset. She was 84 years old and she was tired. But it was a good tired, the tired of a life well lived. Thomas sat beside her, himself now an old man with grandchildren of his own. "Are you all right, Mother?" he asked. "I am perfect," she said honestly. "I am exactly where I am supposed to be." That night, Josephine passed away in her sleep, just as Noah had. They buried her beside him on the rise, and the entire community came to pay their respects to the woman who had walked into Deeming as a desperate, penniless girl, and had built a legacy that would endure for generations. The ranch continued under Thomas's management, then his children's, and then their children's. The Yates Ranch became a landmark in the region, known for its quality cattle and its rich history, and every new generation heard the story of how it all began. How their great-great-grandmother had walked 3 days through the desert to reach the ranch. How their great-great-grandfather had caught her just before she fell. How from that desperate moment had grown a love story that spanned more than half a century and created a family dynasty. The story became part of the family lore, told and retold, embellished and cherished, because it was more than just a story about two people falling in love. It was a story about courage and perseverance, about taking a chance on an uncertain future, about the transformative power of love and partnership. It was the story of Josephine, who had nothing but walked forward anyway, trusting that something better lay ahead. It was the story of Noah, who opened his home and his heart to a stranger and found his soulmate. It was the story of how two lonely people found each other in the vastness of the desert and built something beautiful together. And as the decades passed and the world continued to change, that story remained constant. A reminder that sometimes the most desperate moments lead to the most beautiful outcomes. That sometimes you have to walk through the desert to find your oasis. That sometimes, when you are falling, the right person will be there to catch you. The wooden fence posts that had marked the edge of the ranch that day Josephine first saw them were eventually replaced, then replaced again. The original ranch house was expanded and modernized. The barn burned down once and was rebuilt. The land itself changed, shaped by generations of careful stewardship. But the rise where Thomas Kershaw and Noah and Josephine Yates were buried remained untouched, a sacred place where the family gathered for important moments. And the story, the beautiful, heartfelt story of how it all began, lived on. Because some stories are too powerful to fade. Some loves are too deep to be diminished by time. And some journeys, no matter how difficult, lead exactly where they were meant to go. Josephine had walked 3 days to reach that ranch, driven by desperation and hope. Noah had carried her inside before she hit the ground, saving her life without knowing he was also saving his own. And from that single moment of connection had blossomed a love that created a family, built a legacy, and proved that even in the harsh, unforgiving landscape of the Wild West, miracles could happen. Their story lived on in the land they had loved, in the children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren they had created, in the ranch that still bore the Yates name more than a century after Noah had first claimed it. It lived on in every sunset watched from that porch, in every calf born in the spring, in every hard day's work followed by the satisfaction of accomplishment. It lived on because it was true, because it was real, because it was a testament to what two people could build when they found each other at exactly the right moment, in exactly the right place, and chose to build a life together. The cowboy had carried her inside before she hit the ground. And then they had spent the rest of their lives carrying each other, through joy and sorrow, through hardship and triumph, through all the moments that make up a life fully lived. And that, in the end, was the greatest legacy of all. Not the land, not the cattle, not even the family dynasty. The greatest legacy was the love itself, enduring and true, a light that continued to shine long after they were gone, inspiring each new generation to believe in the power of love, the importance of home, and the possibility that even the longest, hardest journey can lead to exactly where you belong.